Olexiy Arestovych. Date of birth August 3rd, 1975, in Stelitskaro, Georgia and SSR. Ukrainian politician, intel officer, blogger, actor, contracted advisor to the office of the president in the questions of strategic communication in national defense and security. Today is one of the most popular Ukrainians in the world. Married, has 2 daughters and son. Good day, Alexei. Good day. So here we are in a beautiful and horrible place at the same time. Beautiful because it's the center of life for any Kievan, and it's an old Rus. And all these horrible machinery here. It depends how you treat that. It is a symbol of our victory, right? These guys who drove these machines here, they thought they can push us and define our destiny, and here is the result. Horrible, right? Well, as a professional military, I'm looking at that with a feeling of deep satisfaction and curiosity. It's difficult to arouse negative feelings in me. Mostly, they're positive. Alright, let's walk and see what's here. Can you tell us a bit what is here? Yes, this is Russian BMD-2 with a 30mm gun. This is the top from BMP-3 with a 100mm gun. This is MTLB with some antenna on it. This is howitzer MSTA. This is Tochka, no, that's a different one, but it is a cruise missile, looks like caliber. This is a howitzer D-30, tank T-72, Panzer, a pretty rare example of equipment. That piece is pretty rare too. This was an Arctic Brigade. This is one of their all-terrain vehicles. I saw that in the fields near Katizhanka. This is a sign of our times. Olga and the postals covered with bags. Drapery. Who could have imagined that? I don't think she would have, but... So tell me, you as a military person, you understand details of war. You have an analytical mindset. Did you understand that the war will start? That was inevitable, absolutely. Ever since 2016, when Russia started building stationary bases next to our borders, and they were not even hiding that. They were creating attack armies, the tank army. This is a tool for offensive. There's no other use for them. So what have they done? They had locations of permanent dislocation next to the border, about 60 miles, and then towards the Ukraine they had a training fields. That's where they did the training exercise. So they've been housed there, and they've been coming over to fight and practice next to our border. So they were sort of pushing that story. Wolves, remember the boy crying wolves? So they would be keep coming, those 40 or 60,000 coming over to our border, shooting just to desensitize us. And they kept doing the trainings. Remember 2017, they started being present in Belarus on the permanent base. They did some rotation, but they actually were there all the time. And they also started bringing troops from far away, as far as Far East. Even Soviet Union did not have this kind of training often. And when they revived pontoon engineering brigades, that became pretty clear, because the first thing what Gorbachev did when USSR was de-escalating the threat of a Third World War or threat to Europe from USSR. First thing he dismantled was the pontoon forces, because if you go fight in European theater, every 20 miles there is water, every 200 miles there is a big water barrier. And after a speech in Munich, Putin revived these brigades. That was the sign of offensive doctrine in Russia. And the first direction where he sent them was Ukrainian and Belarus direction. And on the summary of different signs, that was obvious what is going to happen. If you need to explain that to anyone, imagine, have a housewife who needs to understand how it was going. Imagine there is a couple who ordered a restaurant, sent postcards, invited guests, invited music, invited a host, and do you think the wedding will happen or not? Maybe not, but there's a really high probability. And we're not even talking about infiltration and creating other networks in Ukraine, about subversion of our diplomacy in the world. They, I think, took the decision back in 2005. They were really scared by Maidan, by our revolution. I actually, in February of that year, was in Russia investigating the probable outcome, and I wrote a report. It was tabled, and nobody really paid attention to that. But in about July of that year, they adopted a doctrine for annexation of Ukraine, takeover economy, destruction of our economy. They made sure we don't have much of refinery capability, so we'll be dependent upon them. Same major systems of economy, banking system, anything else. They either had a control pack share, or they were controlling it by management level, or all the power ministers of Ukraine were thoroughly infiltrated. It's their agents are still there. It's really a question of the counterintelligence work. It is rather difficult sometimes to analyze for non-military, but imagine that after Maidan, when the aggression from Russia starts, the head of military is the citizen of Russia. The head of police is the citizen of Russia. The head of police, yeah, Zakharchenko. And the head of Secret Service or Special Service, Security Service of Ukraine is a citizen of Russia. I don't even remember when such an operation would have been done against any other country. And those who are not citizens, they're just agents. Yeah, something like that. Or like a burger patty that they could rotate and bite from any direction and chew. So when did you realize that invasion is imminent? It was the end of October. 100% we knew the first date of readiness. That was December 26th, when they should have been ready for Catholic Christmas, but they blew past that milestone because Russians are not exactly punctual. The next date was January 12th for the Old New Year. The next date was 16th? No, 16th of February. They gave themselves a whole month to reinforce everything. They started throwing Russian military police, a Russian guard to the border, and initially they thought that it'll be military that will be doing the campaign, and the Russian guard will join in the process. But here they decided to aggregate them along the border too. So then on the 12th of February, Olympic Games started. China said no, yeah, don't spoil our Olympiad, right? Then closure of Olympic Games. 22nd was their next date, but it's basically 23rd, their military holiday, so they passed that, and on the 24th they attacked. When did you know the date and hour? Probably about 3 hours before that, 3 days before 24th. How did you prepare? Well, I packed my uniform. As you remember, I left the office at that time. I talked to my friends that will go to a military point together. And why did you leave? Well, that circus with Poroshenko and the airport was a breaking point for me. That's why I decided not to continue. I am a proponent that the government needs to either start or not do. The government needs to have strong agencies, security and police and all that, and they need to be strong. If you keep talking on the meetings that we are starting, we gotta investigate, we gotta do this and that, and then people who decide to follow through with what you've been telling them to do not get enough support, and then it's later much difficult to wash off that stain that they sort of did something, but then half-heartedly, and it was cancelled. Well, like recently, did you hear in the news Our security service uncovered the bot farm for the online for hundreds of thousands bots there, and a very well-known political force was behind it. There was seriously, yeah, the owner of that was one of the congressmen from the party. So yeah, Poroshenko's force. So it was a time when I saw some things happening that were not wholeheartedly pushed. And there was a day when I got to the office, touched the handle of the door, and I just didn't want to come in. So I decided to join my friends and go to the front when it happens. And I was having a meeting with a friend. I came home at about 2 in the morning. I knew that the day of 24th, I knew that probably at 5 or 6 they'll start. So I didn't even go to sleep. I had a rifle, pistol, my things. My wife knew what to do. My kids knew what to do. My parents knew what to do. So at the time of start, I was in my car driving to the military assembly point. And on the way, I got a call from the office of the president, and he told me to come over. Podolyak was requesting my presence, so I turned and came over, and he asked me a question: where do you want to be during this big continental war? Because one thing is Arestovych, even detachment commander on the battlefield, another on the tribune doing the strategic communications. So I picked where I could be more effective, and here I am. As a military, you understood everything, right? Nobody gave me a date with a paper with a date, that's when they start. No, as a military, I just saw things happening, and they basically crossed certain milestones that you cannot unwind after. So, okay, I get it. As our Western partners told me in many interviews, and out publicly they said, we warned the leadership of Ukraine that the war will start on the 16th, and then it was transferred from that to 24th from the end of October, and nobody believed us. I would speak for myself. I did not believe the invasion was possible. Why didn't I? Because we're in the 21st century, and I could not have thought that army, that so many crazies are there. Yeah, well, I understood that maybe on Donbass they would do something, but bomb the cities, destroy cities, kill so many civilians. But I am not a military. I was never warned by leaders of US, Britain, CIA, and MI6. Let me open the veil of mystery here. Probably first time, I think. This is my very sincere question. Yeah, I'll answer you sincerely without any information politics. What you'll hear will probably be voiced for the first time in the Ukrainian media sphere. Consider it me saving it for you. Our intel services had very different estimates for this invasion. Everybody agreed that it will happen. The difference was in their estimated dates. That was in September, actually even before that, in April of last year, and some people were saying that it'll be Donbass and maybe some provocations on the Crimea Peninsula. And some other people gave the full scenario of invasion, and the full list was given by Budanov. Yeah, the military intelligence of Ukraine, they're at a very high level today. Even before the war, they were pretty good. So he gave the whole scenario with all different options and milestones, and he gave more than Western intel services. Then remember, our government went to talk to President in the United States, to Washington. They discussed that, and we had a more detailed information than our partners. He was basing it on American intel, right? Yeah, he did, but he also had more details that they did not. Remember, people were laughing at the map that he suggested. The arrows are primitive, but yeah, here we are. And by the way, not many people know that the president actually personally took part in special training in the south. Oh, I remember in Kherson, right? Yeah, that was not too big of a mystery. He partook in those trainings, and they were taken certain measures that our general command was executing to prevent Russian invasion there. But Russians actually succeeded down there in the south. There were a lot of agents, a lot of people they bought. Many of them remain unnamed, and still some were there. They basically sabotaged our effort to fortify the south, and that was the direction where we actually worked, where we put some effort to fortify. And there are some rumors and mysteries floating around about it. So one of the things I want to do is to prevent appearance of alternative war history, especially after the war. And it's not about, protecting the leadership or military leadership or political leadership. No, we just want people to remember how it actually was. We knew we were preparing. If we have not done that preparation, we would not have been fighting for 6 months rather successfully, right? Unprepared country cannot oppose an overwhelming foe when attacked. Since the end of December, actually from the middle of December, we had a series of military training, which in fact were a concealed deployment of Ukrainian military forces. It was all that deployment is usually damaging to the economy, because every time you mobilize your people, your troops, this is a big strain for economy, and the attacking enemy has advantage of choosing when and how. So we mobilized our people, but they pushed their dates by a month. So it was a pressure for us. We mobilized our people, hundreds of, actually tens of thousands of men are asking questions. So when can we go back to work, or when are we fighting? So I remember Churchill, who said the war is a difficult enterprise to be trusted to military. That is pointed at military experts on Facebook, because they are not looking at the situation in all the complexity. Remember how investors were running from Ukraine when embassies were running from Ukraine? And that actually happened before the war, so that was one of the questions that we're solving. Will our economy collapse even before the war starts? So I understand our leadership were in a position that, kind of like yours, they understood that the war is inevitable, but it was hard to accept it in your heart, because this seems to be such a stupid thing. I'll tell you how 5 wars started that happened when I was in service. First Chechen, Yugoslavia, 11th of September, Georgian War, and the Second Chechen. So experienced colonels who were in one capacity or another through 5 or 7 wars, they already see the enemy's airplanes going up in the air, their troops moving toward the border. To the very last minute, even these people think that this is just a demonstration of power. This is another training exercise or something. They just refuse to believe. Yeah, it is difficult to believe. And I understand it is difficult to believe that some idiot wants to start the biggest continental war in Europe since 1945 in the 21st century. Yeah, it was difficult, and we paid a collective price for that. Many people say this is your duty to believe that. Yeah, we believed, we prepared, but morally and psychologically it was not an easy acceptance. Everybody understood that this will happen, but still, on the 24th, all of our aviation evaded the strike. Most of anti-air defense systems evaded to be hit by Russians. 2 were got in the Kherson area, but the rest were safe. In the first 11 minutes of fighting over the skies of Kiev, our anti-air defense shot down 11 Russian jets. So if we were not preparing, how could have we done that? And many people are saying we need to be like Israel, always ready. My counter question is our economy similar to Israel? Are we ready to always mobilize at any moment? So it was a big ask. We had to prepare for the war. We have to do it in a concealed way to not harm the economy and to not provoke the enemy that we are preparing for the war. So it was a difficult task. Did you know what President thought about that. I did not communicate to him directly outside of the meetings, but in autumn he understood that this is inevitable. He talked about that with the United States. He talked about that in Berlin conference. Remember when Putin accused us of being military aggressor or getting ready for some aggression? He countered that, and he was basically on the same page. He understood that the war will happen. People were only concerned about the scale of the events, how big it will be. So the head of the office, president, everybody there, they had no shadow of a doubt that this will happen. But a question people keep asking: why did we not protect Kiev, Bucha, Irpin, these areas? Well, how did we not protect Kiev? We did protect Kiev because they did not take it. Otherwise, Kiev would have been captured. So there was some defense, but many things can be said much later, after the war. Even now, I can just say a few things. The simplest deduction is if we were not prepared, we would have lost this battle for Kiev. And we are fighting for 6 months successfully, and we are breaking their back. So, impossible things starting to happen. Yesterday was the day of our Air Force. Russians had a qualitative and quantitative advantage over us when they attacked us. Now they're not even coming to our airspace. They're not even crossing the front line. So this is our aviation, this is our air defense that stopped them, that prevents them from getting there. Our Ukraine Air Force military did awesome, and I think they deserve a righteous place in the glory hall of military of the world. Okay, what did you feel at the beginning of war? Do you remember your feelings? I remember the first boom that I heard. My wife was not sleeping too. She asked, "Is it that?" I said, "Yeah, I think it is." And where are they hitting? Probably Zhelyane, that's where or Solensky Rayon, that's where the National Guard headquarters are. Probably that's where they're shooting. What are they using? I'm thinking it's cruise missiles and aviation. And what are these? What are these other sounds? Oh, that's our air defense. So what are we doing? We're still sleeping. Just don't wake the little one if he's still asleep, that's good. So I went to the war and they stayed at home. I did not evacuate anyone, did not send anyone from Kiev at this moment. And then when they had airdrop in Gostomel, they were supposed to land near the Square of Glory, near the Museum of Second World War, to be closer to the president's quarters, wherever the helicopters can land. So they were targeting that with the next drop. And we gave the last press conference to reporters, getting our helmets, getting our bulletproof vests, machine guns, rifles. And that moment is when my wife calls me and says, "Oh, there is another hit about 100 meters away from our home." And I said, "Okay, if that continues, what are you doing?" "We're walking outside. If that continues, go to the basement." So, and then she calls me and says, "No, the other shell hit the neighbor house." And at this point, I was telling her, "Okay, pack your things, get kids, and go to our parents. They're in a bit safer place." And it was quite a fun for her. Kids, dogs, it's a madhouse. And as she was packing for about an hour, Russians started to cross the road that they needed to use to evacuate. So I call her and tell her, "Hey, do whatever you want. You have 10 minutes to leave the house. In 10 minutes, you should be gone." So she understands that. They jumped in a car and left. I did not worry about myself, and I did not tell it to her, but I was just sure I will not survive that first phase, because when I started getting messages about 1,200 units, 800 tanks, 50 helicopters, 40 helicopters, I saw what was going in Gostomel airfield. I was thinking that we're probably going to be done in about 12 hours. The first time when I came to a tribune, I was sure that I'll be executed for that in the next 12 hours. But people are saying I used the war for some PR. I actually was realizing that I probably will not survive the next day. So I almost have goosebumps. You were talking and realizing that will be done in about a day. Not the whole Ukraine. I thought we'll probably resist in the last third of it next to Lvov. And you thought the Kiev will be gone as well? Kiev, I gave maybe 2 weeks for street fighting, but after that, they likely would have captured it. It was a very unfavorable proportion. So technically, I thought it will not be possible from military standpoint, 1 to 20. That is their overwhelmed force attacking us. Tell me, what was in the office of the president the first day or two? Was there any panic? No, there was no panic at all. President was a high energy person at that time on like a Cossack drive. His advisors were probably calmer than usual. People were smiling, working methodically, rhythmically. Surprisingly, given the situation, there was evacuation. People were transporting secret documents, secret equipment. The president let people out to help transport their parents, and part of those people who were let out, actually all of them left, transported what they needed to, and then came back. So I take my hat off, especially those who managed to leave Kiev. Imagine you're leaving the surrounded city, and then yeah, they left, did the task, transported documents or relocated their parents, and immediately came back. They didn't even, give me a couple more days. The documents are heavy. They did not use that time this way. They returned immediately. And there were some funny moments too when Yermak, he's a big guy, right? So when there was a bulletproof vests distributed, none of them fit him. So he tried one, two, didn't work. And yeah, his bodyguards basically had to cover him. But and that was the time when we started getting notes about the diversion groups and the assassin groups. And there was a very intense moment when there was fighting on Obolon. So these diversion groups, they started popping up on the second or third day of war. In Lukyanovka, when they attacked the general command from the neighboring houses, the headquarters of National Guard from the neighbor area. And we understand this is an issue, so we ask our military, what special services, what is the number of these agents? And they're saying about 1,200, 1,600. And it's a lot, yes. One needs to understand this is just the backbone, and then they also aggregate more people around them. So there is one shooting near the office, another shooting near the office. In the evening of the same day, a block post near the office engaged with, let's say, unidentified groups. And we were standing with some rifles next to the windows with our guards, me and a couple more people who fought, who know how to do that. We did not have to engage. Our defenders downstairs did fine. And that is the moment when our president says, I will come out. And this was the time when there was in the media that president is either fled or ran away. And he made a point to actually take a picture to show that he is there. I think it was him, Podolyak, Arhamia, and Yermak. And yeah, he exited to the right outside the building. There was still smoke from gunfire there, and his guards were very nervous. But that was about the time when they took that picture, and also the time when our guards told us that there are no ways to escape Kiev. There's a risky way to move to another position that will be a bit more advantageous for work, but he refused. He decided to stay where we were. So tell me, did you have fear, like physical fear? The moment that really ignited that? No, I cannot recall that. I remember I had a wish. I wanted to shoot at least one unit of Russian armor. I took a grenade launcher, put it behind the curtain in my office, and I thought my task is to take at least one Tiger, one armored vehicle before they get killed. Because if you get the enemy, you go to Valhalla. And there was another question too, if imagine our office is destroyed, everybody is killed, and then you're alive, and somehow you survive that. then I was not going to leave. If I am to survive that, I was going to stay in Kiev and do some street fighting. And the second time, so I did some preparations for the street fighting as well. But the second time when I came to see the president, and it was not just me, it was also a few more people with me who understand what's going on, who told him that you're a symbol. It's not just us. You're the top commander. If anything happens to you, our morale will go down. Imagine our people fighting on 9 operative directions. Everywhere there's a different situation, overwhelming power of the enemy. You need to stay in command. And over here, you have maybe a few hours left to command. You're almost done. We told him, if we're not moving, we are done. And he looked at us and said, do you want to quarrel with me? Do you want to pick a fight with me? Otherwise, it's the last time I'm hearing it from you. Whatever is going on, whatever is happening, I'm staying here. So we just shrugged our shoulders and understood that's where we're staying. So tell me, what was the right decision? To do what he did or do something else? In military, there is no such a thing as right or not right decision. There is a decision that you went through and completed, or the ones that were never fulfilled and never went through with. So he completed his decision and he went through with that and it worked. So a couple days after this conversation, our Western allies also reached out to him and offered him a ride, and he closed it with the same intensity. He said, okay, give me weapons, give me means to fight, I'm not leaving, I'm staying. Why did not he leave? It was a principal story for him. To flee, to withdraw, that's not even his character. I think he started to feel his character and mission. It's a very delicate thing. He understood this is something that needed to be done this way. Right now, people are saying that, army and people resist by themselves, they do not depend on the president. We understand this is a false statement. Imagine if your flag, if your leader just disappears. That would collapse the front. So he decided to stay. And I approached him through Yermak a few times, and I did talk to Yermak. Andriy Borisovich, you understand that this is not even a matter of if we all die, this is more about who will organize the resistance on the remaining territory. But he told me, what can I do? You see his attitude. So we stopped trying to convince him because it is useless. What is the most dramatic moment in these 5.5 months of war? What was the most dramatic for you personally? Well, probably Mariupol. I remember when the shell hit the birthing center in Mariupol, when I recorded a clip and posted that, guys, there'll be a different war. That's when we hit their outposts and when some of the first Russian generals died as the result. Because, war is like you're falling under the snow. You're falling knee-deep, waist-deep, and keep falling deeper. That was the war when I understood that it's starting to turn some black, really dark stuff happening. And I was expecting Bucha and other places like that. I already had an accident by that time. I had some relatives leaving from the Russian-occupied territory. There were 3 cars with families and kids there. They checked them, figured they were just families, no military, and told them it's okay to go, and then started shooting in the back. 1 car managed to evade, 2 cars were destroyed and burned completely. So I was kind of counting how soon will they devolve into that spiral. It was the 5th day when they started to be real ugly. Why did they do that? It's a frustration of war. It's imagine you come in as victors and then you see people hate you, people don't want you here, civilians prevent you from doing maneuvers, they help artillery to hit, and they started, okay, shoot up all the windows, everybody is helping Ukraine military to target us, and then, then they just started destroying everything they see. You know what's amazing? We're walking here, it's war, and everything works, people are outside. Yeah, it's the war of 21st century. I noticed it in Maidan in 2014. People are getting killed on the streets here, and you step a block away, and there are other people walking around their daily business. Yep, I saw that in the Middle East in the early 2000s when I was there. Just like that, there's a house. On the other side of the building, there is a firefight going on, and on this side, there are moms with their babies walking. I was in Hebron. Some Israelis took me there and showed around. There was a case when a girl was killed by a sniper. She was carried by her dad, and the sniper got her in the head. And so that's the place. Imagine there's a little kids' playground, and it's all marked with remnants of fights. Here's a good example, right? You see the swing and the concrete defense blocks next to it. Yep. So Hebron, imagine that. That's like 300 Jewish families living surrounded by tens of thousands of Arabic families, Arabs around you. And there's an interesting place there where you stand. You can put one leg in the territory near to the house of the leader of the Jewish settlement, and the other leg is another foot is on the territory of the leader of the jihad. They're not fighting immediately next to each other. They're just neighbors, but they're fighting in all the other areas around it. So, and there are always issues there. There's always death somewhere, but kids still play. So people adapt. So, you think Mariupol is the horror point of this war? It's not the point. It's a very stretched out event. It's tens of thousands of people dead and wounded. Do you think we'll get our heroes back? I think Russians will do anything they can to not return them. And I think we understand, and religious leaders and our other orgs understand that. And mediators who are there, intermediaries, they do understand that too. You see that story of Yelenovka is basically Russians taking themselves not back from the moral field, but also from the legal field. You never kill prisoners of war like that. But they did throw a bone to their ultra-patriots or Putin supporters over there. How can that be? We lost 3 generals, we lost a lot of soldiers taking Mariupol, and you're keeping them and doing nothing to them. They're just prisoners. So I think they threw a bone to that group, showing, hey, see, we destroyed some of them. So summing it up, they'll not give them. Summing it up, no, they will try not to return them. And we'll do our best to make sure they have to return them. So this is the situation for the moment. So the solution is simple. You need to have a lot of prisoners of war from Russian side to exchange. How much time did you sleep daily? First 120 days, maybe a couple hours a day. Probably till the middle of May. How were you even functioning like that? I don't know. Adrenaline, maybe? Hard to tell. I think a man in this situation changes a lot, and there are some subconscious mechanisms starting to work. When I came back here in 2018, 2019 from my rotation, how it looks like. You're walking down the street and you're calculating places you can be shot from. You're walking, you see the fence that's missing some planks, and there is a chance somebody may be shooting you from there, so you run certain distance, you duck, you observe the possible pinpoints where an attack can be executed on you. You start smelling cigarette smell from like 300 yards away. You know, it's interesting phenomenon. Your hearing is very acute, so you hear things way from afar, and it's interesting. The body adapts. Even now, I'm still pretty high on adrenaline and all the things happening, but at least I sleep more now. Were you ever in despair? No. You should understand. It's not even, to some kind of bravado. It's a military aspect of life. It's your philosophic attitude. You've seen death so many times, you never know when it will find you. Here's an example. I think today, somewhere in Danish lands, one guy was killed by a hammer being thrown at the contest. So, if God gives, you live through weird things, and if He doesn't, you won't. I survived an explosion, an anti-vehicle mine. They're saying it's witchery, you don't survive. During the whole war, there are only 2 people who survived such an explosion. So, as they say, everything is written in a big book somewhere, and it will follow through the way it is. You just still have to take measures, but the attitude is pretty philosophic. Do you often talk to the president? I talk to him maybe 14, 15 times, but never tete-a-tete. It's usually a meeting environment. So how can you characterize him? He became way more mature. I was always a proponent that responsibility helps people to grow up and empowers them. Many people are afraid to give responsibility to people, but there is an old trend that is often called a major on a colonel position. These people grow fast. So the war changed him. He became much more substantial, much heavier, I guess, in a good way, more solid. I understand it may sound interesting, but he used to have a lot more human qualities in him because he was feeling for people, he was giving them second, third, fourth chances. He was too humanistic, in my opinion, to many. Like, I'm the proponent of letting people flow, and if you either cope or you don't with the position and tasks you're given. But he was always more human to them. He was giving them bigger leeway. So all that kind of facade fell off him, I guess. As an actor, as many actors have, he had a sort of sometimes acting a president when he was not a president, but he was really playing that role well as a president. Professional would have noticed these moments, but during the war he just got tired and he started speaking the way he thinks, the way he feels, and it's without all that diplomatic caveats and picking the words. He just started to say things the way they are, and by the way, it works. And he created the whole new trend in politics. Remember Macron copycatting him with a t-shirt and unshaved? It does work, yeah, it affects everybody. And this is a big part of world diplomacy, world safety of Ukraine. That's all on him, right? Sanctions, continuous support of allies. And he also needs to understand that he needs to carry himself and be an example, and he must not fret. And we understand there are no politicians, there haven't been in recent times, who were such figures. And also, third is when responsibility is on your shoulders for every decision. It's not, and these things changed him a lot. It's not that he acquired something, he just emphasized them. They sort of opened in him. He had them, but they really evolved into a way more mature version. So it was curious to observe him, how he was adding another pound every day, another pound of authority in everything, in the way he moves, in the way he speaks. And at some point he became the general commander of the country at war. I knew him pretty well before his presidency. Right now I'm looking at him, he's a very different person. You're correct, he is. His eyes, his motion, his face, everything is different. I saw how he transformed. It was interesting. He was somewhat of a lightweight at the start of it. Yeah, an actor, right? Yeah, Volodya Zelensky. And I saw how in a month and a half, he turned into a commander of the country at war. He is basically a figure number one by level of importance in the world, and that serves as a focal point for so many leaders and peoples of different countries from the east, from the west. And I understand this figure was chosen not by accident, by God. That's pretty horrible. There was Lysenko here, right? Yeah, we'll rebuild better after the war. Okay, Andriy Yermak, his figure, his role during the war. So, office of the president is not a constitutional organ. It does not exist in constitution, but it is the office that provides and supports the work of the president in every different capacity you can imagine. So Yermak, every execution of everything that the president says, that's on Yermak's shoulders. He's a great operationist, operation manager, very talented. I'm yet to see somebody as talented as he is. He's a great manager. I've seen a lot of managers in my life, and I want to say that he is the one who actually can. Basically, president gave all the operational things to him, but he also has different status that not many people talk about. People talk that he is administrator, manager, and stuff. He is also a political advisor to the president. He is fully responsible for the international stuff. All the American and the West is on him. And the international politics in relation to the president, because there's also Minister of Foreign Affairs, right? So that's on Yermak. He sleeps in his office. He has no time to go home. He sleeps much less than I do, maybe a couple hours a day these times. And there is not a question that a president would pose and Yermak and his people would not solve. It is a whole system. It's fantastic work, and it's interesting to see what also was happening to him during these times. His point is that he's a huge guy, he's a wrestler, and he's always calm. He was always projecting calmness to the outworld. He was always, with a light flair and a light smile, we'll solve it, don't worry. But here he took that issue very deeply personally. I was thinking why. First of all, he was deceived. Not that he did not expect the war to happen, but he understood what was going. But there were Russians and many other foreign people foreign allies who promised that we'll work it out. And he was telling that to the president. Well, he was not really ensuring the president will not happen, but he was conveying that there was a whole group in the world that was supporting the talk that and the concept that there will be war. They knew there will be war, but they did not do much to support the war. We've been asking for weapons and for assistance back from October, and many of those people failed to support us in time. So he felt that responsibility, that he observed that process before the war, and he turned in not just as a head of the office of the president, but as Andriy Yermak himself. He was the one who created that commission, Yermak, and it's his personal point to finish those Putin allies. He got that principle. He's on fire about that topic. There are people who, sometimes ignite, and if it doesn't work, then they fade out. No, he continues. He's still burning, and he's going to solve the tasks he put in front of himself. Is he de facto president of Ukraine? So in this question, he's very delicate. Everywhere he underlines that president is number one, everywhere, then the head of the parliament, and then the prime minister. These are three top-level people of Ukraine. He calls himself as president's top manager. But just by amount of work he does, he takes definitely one of the key positions in the country. Very often it's probably position number 2. And sometimes number 1. I would not say number 1, because I would not say that Yermak runs the president, because I see their dynamics and I know how they communicate. And how do they communicate? Well, president always listens to Yermak, and Yermak is giving him the data he has, answers the questions, and provides solutions. But president is somewhat keeping him up in the air. He's pretty strict. He never says that, but he basically asks him, how sure are you? Do you know it for sure that this is the thing happening? So I once was at the meeting, maybe a month after the war started. There was one of the officers, and one of the colonels said, this is the information, and so. And Yermak pointedly asked him, did you check, did you verify this information? And the colonel said, well, it needs to be verified. We just got it. And he said, do you realize you're reporting something to the top level of this country that you have not checked? So it's interesting dynamic, and they do share very well the positions where they're friends and where they're in a position of manager and subordinate. So the president does control that relation pretty well. And Yermak is also not a person who needs to be reminded about responsibility. He actually runs ahead of it. He would not allow himself to falter somewhere. He is very detailed, and he would recheck things many times before reporting them to verify this is correct. And you know what surprised me with one of the meetings with Zelensky? He is not a military, but in one of the meetings he started asking, whom do military report to during peace times? Where do money come from? And how the deployment starts if the war occurs? So that raised my eyebrow. I was like, ooh, that he did understand quite some things in his time in office. So I was asking, hey, how long, one of my friends, how long did it take him to understand the main things for army? Yeah, you can't imagine. He really quickly grasped, and Zelensky is not a professional military, but for his position of top commander, he does understand the main points that he needs to control. And it's almost like Wi-Fi. There is an atmosphere in the office where people feel responsibility in front of Zelensky as the person who took responsibility on his shoulders to pull that load. And not even in front of him, but in front of that position and the historic situation we're in, because it's history that gave it to him. And Zelensky with Yermak together managed to create an atmosphere where they do not need to talk about responsibility, but everybody feels it. Everybody feels it really sharp. And this can happen as a person who's somewhat fond of psychology and knows a bit. I want to say that only happens when you are responsible yourself, when you feel that it is important, and that's the way you live, where people understand this is history. This is history, this is no joke. One bad decision, 10 people die. One good decision, you save 100 people. So it is not mentioned, but this is the atmosphere. It's an interesting mix of relations, psychologically very interesting. If anyone ever makes a movie about them, I want to give a hint to actors, because on one hand, these two figures are friends. On the other hand, they're also public officials who need to interact. And it's one phrase said on the friendly level and another on the professional. That'll be an interesting dynamic. So even before the war, there are some journalists were saying that Yermak and Ruslan Demchenko are agents of Russian Federation. Even during the war, Senator Victoria Spartz in America wrote a letter to Biden where she writes basically the same thing. Demchenko was fired. We do understand, at least I understand, that he likely was an agent of influence of Russian Federation. He is an author of Kharkov Agreement. Russia was supporting him, and several presidents talked to me that he's a sort of representative of Russia in the office, and Demchenko was fired based on his health condition. So is Andriy Yermak an agent of Russia? It is not so simple with Demchenko. Me, in some capacity, I'm a specialist on agents. I would tell you, if it would be so easy to unveil the agent, they would have been caught all pretty quickly. But it's not like that. So Demchenko quit because he has a difficult and untreatable medical condition that affects his health. I did know it for a while because I did work with him before joining the office, and he actually left many times during that work to get some medical treatment, and when the war started, it does not help because he needed time to recover, he needed time to work with doctors. I was helping him with a lot of medical questions, my medical family. It's a difficult situation. And his disease doesn't get better with stress. It's related to the nervous system, so yeah. Speaking of Kharkov agreements, he was appointed a minister after those things were written. From his words, I can repeat, and I did ask him once, so tell me, tell me how it happened. So not to go detailed there, the story as he told was as follows. The head of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs called upon him back then, told him that Yanukovych decided everything. We have a necessity to send a representative of Ministry of Foreign Affairs to follow protocol to that meeting, sign something, and give a speech. He did not want to go initially, then he was ordered to. He said, okay, well, I'll do that. And from his words, he added another sentence to it. He added, in the name of successful Euro integration of Ukraine. That was, as he said, the cleansing point for my conscience. But I will not dance around that, but I'll say that, yeah, people do consider him a controversial figure. Some people think he's a Russian representative. True, but these things need to be proven. So when our intelligence services prove that he is a spy, then he is a spy. But it's related to everybody, you, me, Yermak, anybody. But they didn't so far. And there are people who are saying, well, he's a controversial figure, and it's still a president who is making decisions. Anyway, the Demchenko asked to quit, and he was allowed to. Now, speaking about Yermak, there are probably about 20 special services, intel services, tracking Yermak very tightly. Probably 19 of them are American. He's also representative of Ukraine with United States, so imagine the amount of attention he draws from those services. And I have a question. Do you think they will allow a Russian agent to be in this position if they had any based concerns and issues with him in that role? So if he is an agent, and somehow we find later that he's an agent, we'll record several shows and one can write several books, because agents of that level, I think, never existed. Oh, we had presidents who are agents. Well, Yanukovych was not exactly an agent. He was a managed figure, but he also did a lot of things against Russia. Yanukovych was not an agent. Okay. I have a question to you as a person who understands a lot. Tell me that then. In Soviet times, he was twice in jail, Yanukovych, twice investigated. When he quits prison, he joins party, becomes a head of the big company, big organization, travels abroad. These things do not happen. That's different. Yeah, he could have been somewhat influenced at some point. Yes, he could have been doing work. But when a person becomes a president, when a person becomes a leader of other agencies and other secret services, it is very difficult to keep him as an agent, because that kind of takes you off the hook. It is impossible to make you do tasks when you lead. You just cannot force a person to do any work for you when he's a leader of that level, because whatever you dump at him and throw, hey, he was our agent before, it's automatically considered to be blackmail and just special materials concocted to bring some dirt and try to smear him in his political position. So there is no way, what I'm saying is there's no way to pressure a person of that level to do anything for you, because any attack, he can say, oh, this is just a smear campaign, and refuse to do anything. So, summing it up, he is not an agent. Can you say that? I want to be very accurate. Here that I don't know. I don't know any single person for sure in our government that is a spy, because basically, by the way, there are positions which, by the fact that you occupy that position, there is a counterintelligence file on you immediately. Yeah, do not believe anybody. That reminds me, I was a friend with Kiev and Leonid Bronivoy, a famous actor who played in Russian World War II movie. He played one of the Nazi generals, and he said that you cannot trust anyone. You can trust me, but do not trust anyone. Yeah, but let's look at the logical facts. So the logic fact is that if he is a spy, then he causes much more harm to Russian Federation by his action than any good things he can cause. And this is prohibited by the rules of the agent work. You cannot have an agent who causes more damage than he gives good stuff. Since he is hitting them so hard on the sanctions, and I have some relation to the work of that commission, I know what is happening there and what will be happening. one should shy away from having these agents. So summing it up, he is an amazing manager and a great person. He is a very good human, yes. He supports, very loyal, he supports his people with his whole heart. He is a great manager, he's playing one of the historic roles in this war. And everyone who wants to prove that he's an agent, I can only wish some success trying to do that. So before the war, I argued with the president, I quarreled with the president on 3 topics. Personally? Not really, but yeah, you can probably say that it was personally. I was talking about corruption in the country, publicly. I was talking about our fight with freedom of speech, publicly. And I was publicly telling our president about horrible cadre decisions, personnel decisions. So basically the same stuff I was talking about before I left, right? Yeah, I was also talking about the weakness of power agencies. I was telling him you cannot have people like Nikolai Tищенко next to him. I know Kolya close. I will not elaborate on that. Okay, I was saying we are the fighting country. We're the country at war. Our Minister of Defense is Taran, a person of low professional and personal qualities. He is not a match for the position he has taken, and then for half a year, he's not talking to the head of General Military Command, Khamchak, and very often start lawsuits against each other. And now Khamchak, who is being sent as ambassador to Slovenia, he did not just prepare for war, he failed to fulfill the orders that were put for him to execute. The money were not spent on military. So let me quote that same World War II movie, 17 Moments of Spring. That was a fight of small pettiness. That story with Khamchak is a sad story. Petty characters, they overwhelmed government matters. One cannot say that they did not fulfill their work completely and did not make purchasing and other decisions. Officially, they reported they did 99.5%. Actually, under him, we purchased those first Neptune missiles that hit Moscow cruiser. But the problem was that in those times, between the government matters and personal attacks, very often he did choose personal attacks. But it's not governmental level, right? Well, he did have some good skills, though. He was a great negotiator. As a young officer, he was in Libya, and that's where his talent sprouted. As an example, he met once in his position with a Japanese counterpart. Instead of 4 hours, they were talking for about 6 hours. And back then, they gave us military support, even some things we cannot discuss right now. That was his strong suit, and he had a lot of good qualities. But he was an ex-general, and 2 generals can never work calmly together, or seldom ever can. And that position when, Western concept when the head of command is a general, and then Minister of Defense is civil, but he actually is a lieutenant general, ex-lieutenant general. So in essence, it's two generals struggling with each other, and it's a separate world. In every army of the world, one can find those generals who are waging wars against each other. We like to quote Israel. Talk to my friend David Gendelman. He's a great Russian-speaking expert on Israel military and specifically general confrontations, and they're pretty spicy. Our confrontations here are just baby stuff. And right now, the fact that Reznikov and Zaluzhnyi are somehow uniformly working, this is a miracle, but this is also a personnel miracle, because they were both appointed with that thought in mind. And Reznikov is a diplomat, he's a lawyer, right? Very high-level one, yep. And Zaluzhnyi, he's also personal qualities. They both understand that the homeland has to be on the first place. Everything else after. What do you think about Zaluzhnyi? Oh, I know him back from my training, military training. I was helping with disciplinary unit, and he was in one of the cells, so I came in and said, hello. But yeah, we know each other since then. What do you think about him? I think we're lucky that Zaluzhnyi is leading our military forces in Ukraine, because Valera is a really truly professional military. Because some people don't feel that he does. You know how they say a sailor has two loves, the land and sea. So he has that for the army. He loves what he's doing, and he's also feeling responsibility for the country. He's hyper responsible. And also he has a very important quality that needs to be appended to generals surgically if they lack it. He listens to people. Sometimes he probably listens too much because he shouldn't listen to some people, especially during the war, but he listens to everybody. And the third, he is a strategist. Many people before the war, even though he was the head commander of the RDLO, of the Western Front, some people thought that he's too military. They learned later that he can see far ahead and he can cold-bloodedly plan. And with all his sensitivity, because he's sensitive, he's a good human. It's, extra sensitivity is not too good in politics usually, but he somehow managed during this war to gather himself together. I'm speaking as a psychologist now, and stand on some very tight rails that do not allow him to be pushed from his line. That is important, because during the war, it's not just the troops fighting on the land, but it's also the characters of commanders behind them. Remember the movie Liberation, the Soviet thing? There are not too many movies in Soviet Union about high commanders, so this movie actually showed that. Because you do see the characters of commanders who fight against each other, who can break who. So he found the line, and he found this internal railway that he stands on, and it's impossible to move him from. I saw how not only Russian military opponents are trying to push him from it, but also our internal politicians trying to push him, or our foreign partners and allies trying to move him away from his road. But he stays firm. This is one of the main quality, that he does not allow to affect the course that he has taken. Let me ask you a question and see how you react to that. Is it true that Zaluzhny's rating is higher than president, and that some people in the office hate him more than Putin? No. All the ratings I saw looked like that. President, me, and then Zaluzhny. I don't know how much one can trust these ratings. Oh, some people will hate you. Oh, that's not even an issue. There are a lot of people working actively against me already. Thing is, Valera is not a politician. He's a government man, he's a countryman, but he would not allow to make any motion, any movement to hurt the country. And this is one of the tastiest thing for our opponents, if they manage to quarrel the president with his head of military command. This is their wet dream. And now let's take a look at it from the eyes of the political party that we will not name, but the ones that are actively digging against the president and Zaluzhny. And one needs to give credit to president and to Zaluzhny, because those guys were talking to their ears through all the different channels, official, unofficial, both of them held steadfast, found the language, and they worked together just fine. There was the same rumors about systematic quarrel of Yermak and Zaluzhny. Some people told me that they were actually fighting. Yeah, they said that we actually fought. Yeah, we know each other for 20 years. He was a general in the same zone where I was in the deployment. This is, imagine that. I'll give you an example. That there would be people and powers and bot farms that would start to claim that between you and Olexiy are fully against each other, at war with each other, that you are digging dirt and compromising materials against each other, and not today or tomorrow one of you will be removed in favor of another. So this is informational thing injected by Russians, and our opposition giddily picked on it. It's not exactly a special feature of our opposition. They usually do that in all the different countries, but perhaps one should refrain from doing it during the country at war, because at this times it becomes the direct actions against national security. So this is, yeah, not a good story. Tell me, Olexiy, what is going on the fronts today? I was waiting for the beginning or the middle of August for us to change things. And tell me, on the fronts, this war started when they hit us on 9 different directions, and they were dominating us in all those directions without even necessity to get too much reserves, and then eventually they started getting reserves from Russia to support them. Half a year later, they need to relocate troops that are already on the front and withdraw them from one direction to another. So now they basically collected everything from Donetsk area and pushed them down to Kherson, Melitopol. Right now, there are almost no new troops coming to the front. Their concealed mobilization is completely not happening. Remember, they were planning to have 10 battalion groups every month? Yeah, no, it's not working. So Russian guys don't want to go fight in Ukraine? Yeah, their public agreement is that they sit on the sofa, switch channels, and watch some war in remote. So what they're doing now in Russia, they switch to building national battalions, and they're trying to recruit people to these battalions, the ones who actually will be active and who can pose threat to Russian regime later after the war. They want to burn the passionaries in the possible fire. They want to, if possible, grind them in the Ukrainian front. Do you see what's happening in the Eastern Front? From Avdiivka to Marinka, they just left the troops from so-called fake republics, DNR and LNR. So now they're really grinding them over the fortifications that were built for 8 years. There's no way to break through there. Why are they doing it? What do you think? They're the most ideological. They're the ones who will not take it if the Kremlin signs the peace treaty. So Kremlin now destroys the protest voice, the protest election group. And they're already ready to go for a compromise. They just don't need those people who will possibly give them trouble. And those groups actually know how to fight for the most part. So yeah, they're just grinding them away and making sure they're all dead by the end of this war, by the time when they sign the agreement. So now they have to move the force to Kherson and to Zaporozhye, so they relocated about 60% of the troops they have. And today or tomorrow they'll have to likely start their offensive, but because we were actively taking out their logistics, they're not even ready to answer the question if they will go with this offensive or they have to stay in defense now. That's what we did in this half a year. We basically destroyed their capability to advance. If they were smart people, they would have already switched to defense mode. So as a military force here, let me ask you, what do you see in Donetsk area and what in Kherson? So in Donetsk, they will try to capture Mariinka and Pesky. Kramatorsk and Slaviansk too? Oh no, that's not even the focal. Bakhmut is even at question, not even taking the city, just surrounding it from the north and the south. They can't. That's why they moved the troops from there. So whoever is on the Eastern Front will try to do the small tactical Avdiivka, Marinka, and Besky and report that even if they succeed, by that time they'll completely run out of resource there. There is no offensive there, like none. They can try to do some offensive to Nikolaev or Kryvyi Rog. Maybe pretend some activity in Zaporozhye. Can they take Nikolaev and Zaporozhye? No, that's impossible. With the current amount of forces, no, I don't think so. They also need to provide for a referendum. The so-called head of Zaporozhye signed today. Problem with referendum, you need to do that on a certain territory because you need to somehow formalize the territory. Because after that, if you capture even another 100 kilometers, what, you need to do another referendum? So this is a bit demanded. You either do a referendum or you do the offensive operation. They're both self-exclusionary steps. So to be smart, one needs to switch to defense and then try to defend as if they're on territory under that legend. But right now, they have aggregated their troops and they had a plan to advance. But they're not switching to that because logistics is at zero. All the support is completely gone. All that right bank story is hanging by 3 bridges that we control with fire. So in order to perform any offensive, one needs to be a complete idiot. So now they're at a fork to advance, to pretend that they're starting an offensive, or to stand in a defensive formation. It is difficult. What is your prognosis? It's difficult to say. I think they'll probably have a combination of different. They'll try to move somewhere, they'll do some short counterattacks here and there, but for the most part it will be defense. So let's look at Kharkov up north. There was 144th Division full-blooded, at full capacity standing there. We thought they reserved it there for Kharkov, but they started taking parts of it and throwing down to Kherson. So they're running out of the last operative reserves. And to create new ones, one needs from 4 months to half a year to rebuild that. In that time frame, we'll have F-16s flying over Ukraine. Oh yeah, our pilots are learning. So Russian army is at the plateau of their capabilities in the middle of June. Ever since, they'll never be as powerful, and that plateau starts to tip over. And those battalion tactical groups they gathered, they're only 2/3 personnel-wise from the normal one. Tired, worn out. Is a third rotation for many of them. Some of them were near Kiev. They're fighting on the old equipment, partly demoralized, and they cannot fulfill tasks as the regular military. They're even getting criminals from jail to fight in this war in Russia. So that you don't do that from the good life. So they need to solve the question of how to hold the lands they captured, and Ukrainian forces are becoming stronger. We mobilize more people, we get more equipment, we get more aid from the West, and this is a road to nowhere, because at some point these two graphs meet and we start breaking them. It might start happening a bit later than we want to, maybe not August but November, but that's what they understand. That's why they do the blackmail from Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. They want to threaten the whole world and force us to negotiate. Well, they want to capture the station. Yeah, they already captured it. Do you think they just want to get electricity to Russia? No, it's more of an offensive to blackmail the world and to force Ukraine to sit down and negotiate. Yeah, thugs, right? Yep. But today we took out, for example, 2 command outposts and several warehouses, and that happens daily. In Melitopol, we hit about 100 high-level officers, so they're losing there. All that hysteria in their army and all their hype in the society is based on their fact that they're still somewhat advancing. They're losing troops, but see, we're still advancing. We're taking 100 meters a month, we'll capture the whole Ukraine. But the moment they suffer a big defeat, for example, they lose Kherson or Melitopol, any city, this is a catastrophe. So if they lose Kherson, I don't know what Putin will tell their people. And Russian position, I think every thinking person understands that the trend, when this war becomes more unpopular than popular, it will start happening when we take any big city back. Because right now they have the story that, yes, we lost 50,000 people, but we captured something. Do you think we'll take Kherson? I will take everything back. What about Kherson in the near future? Define near future. 2 months. Questionable. Don't think in a month, but in 2 there is a chance. Because there are certain things happening, certain trends happening, and we need to see what is happening with the group down there. They still have about 20 battalion groups on the other bank of Kherson, and they can go either Zaporozhye or they can stay there. Are they full-blooded? No, they're beaten up. Instead of 800, they probably have 400, 500 people per each. Alright, so another question. Tell me, when do you think this is over? Can it be a story for years to come? It may be a lengthy story down to the next summer, maybe. Because when the army of level 5 and level 3 are fighting like United States and Iraq, that happens fast. But after that, there was a long, somewhat civil war happening, right? And when there are two armies like Ukrainian and Russian armies of both level 3, 3 plus, 3 minus fighting, they were 3 plus, we were 3 minus, and now it's slowly switching backwards. Now they're fighting on T-62 tanks, and we're getting new stuff. There was a recent story that Americans gave us anti-aircraft defense missiles, and our allies said you cannot use them from air, but in a week we figured how to do that, and we took out several of those defense units in Kherson area. Our fighters just targeting them and shooting them. So you see us breaking them. Yeah, this may be a lengthy story, but very soon there'll be a breaking point. But after that, there'll be a long story or a story how it will unfold. Because are they ready to fold? Are they ready to run, withdraw, or there'll be those, so to say, 100 North Korean volunteers? Just theoretically speaking, if they gather more resources. So, do you think they want negotiations? Yeah, they do want negotiations. They seriously beg for that. What do you think they want to put on the table? Do they want our capitulation? No, there is no that. Even in March, they did not talk about it. They want neutral status, no NATO. They want Crimea and Donbass, 100%. And they want Kherson and Zaporozhye? No. I think they're ready to give up those lands. I think that's 100%. Oh yeah, and take off the sanctions. That's what they want. Give us Crimea, Donbass, and take the sanctions off so we can prepare and attack you again. Only we'll be better prepared. President will not go for that? No, he won't. Never. Does the president understand that Ukrainian people want the only thing to get to the borders of 91? Yes, he does. And it's his task. He put it as a personal task. On the other hand, as reasonable people, we understand that military way we can at least get to the borders of the 24th of February. After that, it could be diplomatic solutions to get the Crimea and the Donbass area back, but this is not even a question that we are getting it back. So it is not a projected task for somewhere in the future. This is a real task. We need to find a way to defeat Russian Federation here in Ukraine and to liberate our occupied territories. Is the West tired from us? This is another interesting narrative that our opponents in this conflict like to inject in the media sphere. Nobody is tired. Reznikov asked me to say in that interview, he told me to, and I asked, verified, can I? He said, yes, please. He said, everyone in Ramstein shook my hand and said, please, finish that monster. The Swedes were adding for Poltava, French were adding for Borodino, Germans were quiet, right, but winking. They are all tired of that regime. They're saying, finally, you will put an end to that, and let's do it together. Politicians will not say it on print, but this is not nothing. This is ministers of defense of these countries. Are you an optimist today? I'm always an optimist. We are recording, but okay. With all of you? Very few people have a picture like that. Here, a trident, 3 fingers. Thank you a lot. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to heroes. All right. So you are an optimist. The worst scenario I see is skirmishing to the next summer. But this is the worst and we still win at the end. I do not believe in Korean scenario. I don't believe in stabilizing the current front. The worst scenario is somehow we fail in our counteroffensive. We turn into positional war. We stand winter in these positions, gather more equipment over winter. Lend-Lease is only starting on the 1st of October. And after the winter, we take them out feet first. Are there any channels, any people who connect Zelensky and Putin directly? Is there any person who talks to both of them and sends messages then to each other? I think it is done through intermediaries. I don't think. Who's the intermediary? Erdogan, Abramovich? I think Erdogan. Not for sure, but this is just a collection of different signs that I see. Does Abramovich play any role? Our negotiators saying that he played an outstanding role already. I don't know the details though. But he's a person of Putin. How can he be doing anything in our favor? But he's a person of Putin who lives in Britain and who has a strong monetary interest in this conflict, in the result of it. What do you think? A meeting of Zelensky and Putin, is it necessary or not? At the end of the war, at the end of the fight, perhaps. The wars either conclude with something or they don't and they continue. Like Japan and Russia, they're still nominally at war. Or they end with negotiations. Can Putin die before that meeting? Yeah, he can, but it would be a little too easy. That's the thing. It's a little too good to be true. Unfortunately, the history seldom ever works like that. The conflict of that scale that was, one can say, being prepared for 400 years, that's one of the toughest duking out between our two peoples in the last 400 years. That usually doesn't end like that by the laws of literature, but in this case it would have been a very abrupt end of the war. Same day, yeah, pretty much. Tell me, are you the only person who officially articulates from the office? No, not. There's also President, Andriy Yermak, Mikhail Podolyak. I also speak, we're in the same status, advisors to Yermak, Timoshenko, others, but they're not in the military. Yeah, it's just two of us who speak about the war. But we don't speak about the war exclusively. There's military guys talking about that. We speak military and political stuff. We convey what people think in the office about what's going on in war. That's what people come to us for. They want to get the estimate, what do we think, how do we gauge, what is our reaction to things. People want to understand what do we think about and what do we want. And military, they're just doing it. You're one of the most popular people in the country. People know you abroad, people know you in Russia. Yeah. Have you ever thought about being that popular? Frankly, I kind of always knew that eventually I will be. From my childhood, kind of on the feeling level, I never knew how it will happen. And the most important thing, I did not do anything to become popular. I'm sort of introverted, separate introvert who would rather stay on a couch and philosophize about life and to go fight for something only when the country calls upon me. What effects of that popularity do you notice? Well, people write a lot, social media, tons of interviews, world media, our media, and I can't go get coffee. An attempt to go get coffee results in about 2.5 hours of walk outside and picture opportunities. Do you know that many girls like you and they won't marry you? Inconveniently for them, I'm married. So I'm thankful for their attention. Is there any jealousy from your colleagues to you? Any of them jealous to your popularity? But some colleagues are telling me about other colleagues that some of them are, and they're trying to whisper things up there, and so on. Just like in the usual miracle movie, there's a usual court life. People are cheating and finding ways to be powerful. So, on some of the channels, I heard that you and Mikhail Podolyak are going to form a new political party. This is rumors. Are you going to go into politics? I mean, full-bodied? Yeah, party, parliament, maybe higher, maybe president. I'll say something that I have not said before. Some people are saying about my crazy rating. Look, the girls are hanging out from the car to take a picture of you. My rating is the president's rating. I never separate myself from the president, and I don't separate myself from people I work with. It may be, I may have a different opinion, but I'll never take it out into a public fight. I had my own opinion before the war when I wanted to stop working. So while Zelensky is a president, while we are at war with Russia, it is not correct for me to even go there. Also, if he goes for the second term, I will not be running against him. So if the president does not go for whatever reason to the second term, you will run for the office? Yes, I will run for the office in this case. So the main statement of Arestovych, if Zelensky does not go for the second term, Arestovych runs for president. It may as well occur that I'm walking on the beautiful streets of Kiev with the president of the future Ukraine. So this interesting game needs to be played to the end, right? What is power? I've been in it for a couple years, and I can say that power, some people take as... the dog is barking. Some people take it as an opportunity to play the best game in your life, to see new opportunities and stuff. For me, power is an opportunity to help more people than you could have helped otherwise. And if it is the high power, you can help a country of 40 million people, and you can help maybe not only your country, but humanity in general. Not as adventure. So I take it as I don't take it as an adventure like I did maybe 10 years ago, or like a pinnacle point of my trajectory. Ooh, that's awesome. It would be nice then to read lectures, and so that's also a somewhat interesting thing for me. But right now I see it as an opportunity to do a lot of good things for a ton of people. So if anything, I would want to use it as that opportunity. I don't want to monetize a rating or something like that. I would want to use it as an opportunity to help people in my country. I was thinking, why did I end up in this story so early, so young? And I am seeing that this is sort of a school as a training. And I also notice things that could be improved, that could be done different and better. So this is somewhat an expedited training that I'm going through, I think, and in my life. And one way or another, it will work, I think. So tell me, please, I know that you have a psychology as a hobby for many years, and I also know that you're a pretty good psychologist. Tell me, why do you like it? I started that acquaintance from a theater, Black Square, the theater of improvisation. What is the main feature of it? You have to play without any script. You basically create the performance as you go. And you're thinking for the actor, for the editor, and for the viewer, on your feet, and for the author. And I started asking questions, and I was just 17 years old at that time. I started asking question, where does the material come from? What inside me gives birth to that story? And that's what attracted me. I'm interested in humanity as it is. I have a natural inborn curiosity to human. I'm very interested in people in all their ways. And all people, not just famous actors like Vasily Livanov, but also a janitor. Oh yeah, like even a bum somewhere, right? I'm curious, I do not discriminate, I'm curious about people. I continue to self-educate myself. Does it help you? It looks like it does. I never made it a goal, a purpose to use it for help. People accuse me often like, you're spreading too thin, you're an actor, you're military, you're intel. I told them, wait, it will collide at some point, it will come together. And it did. So imagine that. Imagine we take me out of this story. There's no Arestovych in this conflict with Russia. It will be a different story. Indeed, you are somewhat a symbol. It's a mix of different qualities. Somebody needs to tell the story of what are we fighting, how are we fighting. Somebody needs to work with people to explain the storyline. So it all kind of aggregated together in one point. It focused here and continues to play on. And yeah, somebody needs to put people to bed. How can you explain that they also come down and just listen to you and fall asleep at night? I never put a task in front of me to calm them down. I was just saying what I think. And since I was calm while doing that, I'm really pretty calm. I was saying, don't worry, the first 3 days are the most dangerous and looking scary. After that, we'll win here. It's difficult there. People are saying that I'm kind of singing lullabies to them. No, it's not true. If you listen to what I say, I was saying a lot of difficult things. I was the first to say that it is impossible to de-blockade Mariupol. There are many politicians who are afraid to come out and say that. But this is, again, sort of like Wi-Fi of calmness emanating from. Can one ignite you? Yeah, well, it is possible to ignite me, but it will be a controlled ignition. So I'm on the level of personal development when I ignite, when I decide to ignite. Tell me, were you born in Kiev? No, I was born in Georgia. Have you watched the movie Mimino? My father was giving soldiers for the shooting of the movie. Yeah, there was the scene where two sheep headbutt. My house was right behind that hill. So you've been in Ukraine for a long time, right? I started here, and then after that since '87. We're walking in Kiev, beautiful places, right? What do you feel when we walk on the streets of Kiev? You know, I was really impressed by 1500-year celebration of Kiev. Yeah, in 1982. I got here in those times, and I remember those mosaics of the old knyaz and old rulers. And there were several movies released back then, right, about the old Rus. And that source of an old Rus really impressed me so greatly that I felt that this is a significant part of our identity. And my mom is Russian, and I understood how different are we. We are different peoples living next to each other, because Kiev was Russian-speaking back then, almost completely, but there was sort of a different twist to that there are different people growing from this source in Kiev. And over in Moscow, it's almost like a side sprout. Almost like these days one can say it's an ugly side sprout of the original source. And here we'll be walking through the Golden Gate. I was feeling such a deep-rooted connection. Andriy Yermak, the 10th church here, and that connection with the lengthy story going into the depth of the years. However, they tried to tear it out and move it to Russia. It didn't work. It's still here. I walk here not because it's a city where I lived for many years, but because with every step I feel that connection. I'm walking where Yaroslav the Wise and Vladimir Monomach were walking back in the centuries ago. And I sort of feel some connection and responsibility to them. Yeah, there is that saying, what Prokopyevich spoiled, Arestovych will try to undo. So I feel that obligation. I understand that Ukrainians are brand number one in the world, but it needs to be added with that initial identification from the depth, from those roots of Rus. We are good, but we'll be even better if we add this connection. For Europe, it doesn't really matter much. They're not competing for the history that we have here, and we do have a northern enemy, a northern neighbor that wants to pull away our history, that wants to capitalize on our story. Remember when Putin was talking about sending a message before the war? He did not say anything about economy or politics. He only talked about meta-historical reasons. And as far as I know, there are only two people taken seriously, he himself and me. So I think we need to make sure we do have that connection. We need to restore it. I was talking to Burmistrov. In the 90s, it was difficult to live here in Kiev, and he is an intellectual, and he could have studied and worked in Germany and other places. But he answered that I can only be inspired in Kiev. I live and I can be inspired here. It is a God's place, in a way. It is a special place. It's a place of power. So it's not even a question for me. You said about that Golden Gate. So besides you seeing things in the future, you kind of read my mind. I want to conclude our interview near the Golden Gate. And it's important, I think, for us to put a period next to that Golden Gate, the area where old Kievans were defending their city back centuries ago. I still remember the old gates of brick. I remember my parents taking me to these gates. And then when I got here back in '87, I was coming here and I was spending hours near that Golden Gate. I wasn't thinking in these categories back then, but something did attract me to that area. And I had a feeling as if I communicate with people who are passing through these gates through the centuries, tradesmen on horses walking by. I had such a feeling only in one other city in the world, in Jerusalem. So some people call Kiev New Jerusalem, not for nothing. And that feeling of continuous history in our postmodern world, this is precious. So the story can be given as a book, as a training exercise, or can be given as a picture. But sometimes it is given to you as an inspiration. You had a lot of opportunities to live Kiev too, right? Yeah, I could. But you cannot live it. No, I can't. I still choose to stay here. Remember, like Ilfin Petrov had it, every citizen loves his city, but Kievans are, with a concealed smile, quietly know that their city is the best. I live in a way that I'm trying to not be shy about acknowledging things that I was wrong about. And I don't want to be quiet about that. And I want to use this opportunity publicly that I was wrong in relation to you. Seriously. When I saw you first time, I did not know you. I thought, oh, they picked another idiot to the president's team. That's a new one. He speaks quiet, he doesn't look too inspirational, and I even was rude to you during your cast. But you are very professional, and I thought maybe he is not so simple. And I want to say that I was wrong. You revealed yourself from a different side. I can see a different person in you now. And I want to say it publicly. I want to say that acknowledging my mistakes, that only makes you stronger. I actually had people at the office laughing at me saying he'll never admit it publicly. And I did tell them that, no, he will. And yeah, look at us here. And by the way, you did acknowledge that even before the meeting, right? I did, yeah. And I still consider it's important to voice it out loud. And also, it's important because not many people make it a point to project an example to others. People taking public positions, public offices, it's important for them to set standards. And I want to say another thing that's about myself, and it's about myself and making mistakes. Because when I was in Britain, when I was in my 20s, I worked with British Intel. I was Intel already. And there was a Yugoslavian war happening, and the British intelligence guys told me a lot of things. One of the important things was that the highest virtue of a gentleman is to work with data in given circumstance. So I did not quite fully grasp it, and now 20 years later, after living my life and working in the Intel and all the things I did, why is that important? It is important that because people who work with given situations, with given circumstance, they have very colorful biography. They have a lot of opportunities to make mistakes and to try different hats. And they've done a lot of different things in their lives. And at some point you do encounter other opponents who've been working as political animals for a while, and they target that. And I was one of those who actually lived my life, and I was curious. I jumped into theater. I dove deep into Intel. I like psychology. And you looked at me before you saw my biography, and I think the first impression you had with dealing with people, you look at that, you almost thought, yeah, I kind of thought it's a fraud, right? You're a fraud. And that's a depth. That's a question of depth. Is it a fraud, or is it indeed a character of a person? So the moment you actually start digging deeper and diving deep, you realize that this is actually a character. This is all real. I also want to say here, we are standing at the Golden Gate. I want to tell for those who don't know Kiev. This is an amazing monument from the ancient times. And I'm here with Olexiy Arestovych months after the beginning of a horrible war that Russia started with our country. And it might be symbolic if you turn to millions of people and tell them something, being here in a holy place for every Kievan. So, dear friends, this is our land. Friends, Rus is us. And the truth is with us. The war is going for them trying to become us, to make us not exist. They changed history back in the 18th century. They stole our name and used it in Greek spelling Rossiya to call themselves us. And they want to steal our identity and our essence. They want us to not exist. So here, standing in front of the Golden Gate, I want to tell you that Rus is Ukraine. God is with us. This is one of the core cultures of the Europe and of this planet. And our duty before our ancestors and before our children is to make sure that this question is put to rest, so the whole world understands who we are and what do we stand for. And so that hundreds of years further down the road, when there'll be Earthlings landing on some other planet with Ukraine chevrons on their shoulders, they would be telling Americans and Frenchmen, we're going first because we are Ukrainians. And this war, it is a great opportunity for us and for the whole world to see that we are not Russia. And what do we stand for? And that we have started here in this area thousands of years ago before Christ, and will continue for thousands of years to come. And this is the uninterrupted line of those people who are looking at us from these Golden Gates frescoes, from the frescoes and our mosaics in our subways. This is live history. This is our history. This war is different for Europeans, but our war is existential because we're fighting a foe that wants us to disappear. We will not let that happen. We started here and we're going from here forward, and I postulate all that to be true. And everything that Olexiy Arestovych said will come true 100%. Thank you, Olexiy. Thank you.